Hey guys, welcome back to Defeating Diabetes. I'm Alexa, and today we're going to be talking about traveling with type 1 diabetes. Depending on how you travel, there are several ways to come up to this topic. If you are taking a road trip, it is a lot easier. You just, depending on what you're on, if you're on pump or sites, you just bring a couple of those, at least one for every day, probably, depending on how far you're going and where you're going. Just in case you have some failures or rips out or whatever. You should always have a bottle of insulin, some test strips. Like I said, traveling on a road trip is a lot easier, but if you're going somewhere hot and it's in the summer, you need to make sure that a lot of your stuff is cooled or in the correct temperature. Obviously, you don't put like your pump or your extra pump sites in ice, but like insulin needs to be in ice. And Lantus, always bring Lantus with you when you're traveling with some syringes. But we're going to talk more about traveling with diabetes on a plane, because that's a lot different than traveling with diabetes in a car or a boat even. Well, actually, that's a lie. I don't know about traveling on a boat. I've never traveled on a boat. So back to traveling with diabetes on an airplane. Always, always, always put your diabetes supplies in your carry-on, because if you don't, it is guaranteed that your suitcase will be lost over the air. It is guaranteed that if you put your diabetes supplies in there and check that bag, you are never going to see it again. That is why you should always put your diabetes supplies in a carry-on or in your personal backpack. I'm traveling soon, so I've been up to date on all of the guidelines and rules about where you can put things and what you can bring. They're really chill with medical supplies. The main thing is that you need to have them in an area that's easy to get to in case they do ask to see them. So like, don't have it buried in your suitcase because they might ask you to take it out and then you would have to unpack in front of everybody, which is not fun, because packing is not fun. So always have it on top or like out and ready to slide into your suitcase. That's easy too. So getting down to business, always make sure you have plenty of treating supplies, glucose tabs, because you can't bring liquids into an airport or on a plane. You can buy a juice and I guess carry it onto the plane, but that's kind of not fun. So I normally just have like tabs or candy. Pixie sticks are really good in case I do go low while traveling, and then when I arrive to my destination, I normally buy like a box of juice from the nearest grocery store. So have tabs or another treating option. Make sure you have at least one glucagon. Depending on your stay and depending on how low you normally go, you might need to bring two, but one is normally pretty good. Bring a whole bunch of sites, because you never know how many are going to fail. When I normally travel like a long distance away from my house, I bring a whole box of Omnipods, which has 10 of them in there. I bring more than enough alcohol swabs, because those things you can use for other items. So bring some like Tegaderm. I don't know if you guys use these. They're good for keeping on sites, or bandages if you need a bandage, because we are humans. We do bleed. So make sure you have plenty of sites, more than enough for your trip. If you have a 5-day trip, still bring 10. If you have a 7-day trip, maybe bring more than 10. If you have a 2-day trip, bring at least 5. Just bring more than enough, because you don't want to be unprepared. You also should bring, if you're on a sensor like I am, you should bring extra sensor sites, because these suckers rip off like crazy. So I'm bringing 2 of those. Then like the other stuff, you always want to make sure you have a Lantus pin, even if you are on a pump, because if worst case scenario, all of your sites don't work, all they rip off, you don't have enough, whatever happens, you get lost in the woods. Lantus is always great to have, because it's an easy figuration about how much you need. to cover yourself for the amount of time that you won't be on a pump. So make sure you always have a Lantus pin for emergencies. Make sure you have at least 1 bottle of insulin, depending on how much you use. My pump holds 200 units for 3 days, and I don't normally use 200, so I'm just bringing 1 box with me on my trip, which is like a week, so that should be enough. Leave it in the box. Leave as much stuff in the box with your prescription on it as possible. All of my insulin things have like my prescription on them, so if you have your like prescription on them or your information, have as much of it as possible, because then they cannot question whether or not you actually do need this. It just makes life a little easier. Bring test strips. Bring test strips, because when you travel, diabetes is not nice. You're either low or you're high, or you're constantly just like whirlwind, doesn't know what's going on. Bring test strips. You're going to use them. You're going to need them, especially if you're going somewhere that's outdoorsy, or you're going somewhere and you're going to be eating a lot of food that you don't necessarily know how to bolus for. You're going to want some test strips. That being said, although I know none of us really use these. We're told we should, but none of us do, and I'm sure you can guess what I'm talking about. Lancets. All these suckers I probably got back in 2006 when I first got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I never changed my Lancet, which I know is bad, but none of us do, so it's okay. We're all in this together, right? Till your finger doesn't bleed anymore, then you can change it. So bring Lancets just in case. They are actually useful for other things, but you should still bring them. And bring an extra poker, especially if you have like a sticky one that normally works, but sometimes it's just like meh. Bring an extra poker. I suggest it's helpful if you drop it, break it, lose it, gets taken, I don't know. Just bring an extra one. Sorry, I have dogs. They bark. Also bring syringes. Because even if you are on an insulin pump, you should at least have 10. They're pretty easy to pick up at a store, but I'm bringing 2 packs of 10 just in case anything happens or goes wrong. They're also great if your blood sugar is high and you're insulin resistant. It's easier to bring your blood sugar down if you take a shot versus bolusing with your pump. Obviously, if you're on shots, you're going to need a lot more than just 20 syringes for your trip, because you probably take about 4 or 5 of these a day. You're going to need more than 10 for like the trip. So bring more of this and less of this if you're on shots, because you don't have these. You have these. So bring these. If you are on a pump, which I'm guessing the majority of you are because it's so much easier, bring some of these at least, please, because they help in situations. That's the majority of my diabetes supplies that I bring. I normally do have like my meter, which I'll show you guys. Sorry. I have my purse sitting right over here. Never mind. My meter's over by the couch. Bring your meter. Obviously, bring any chargers you need. If your pump runs on batteries, bring batteries. Bring a quarter if you have a Mini-Med pump. I don't care if you think you have a quarter in your wallet. Bring a quarter. Because all my friends have Mini-Med pumps and no one ever has a quarter. And it is the worst thing in the world. So please, bring a quarter. Even though it sounds very odd, bring a quarter. These are the majority of the supplies. Again, make sure that they're in an easy to get to place or they're out and ready to be put away. So if they do ask while you're going through a security to see all of your items, it's easy and you don't have to unpack your entire suitcase. Also, it was suggested to me a while ago and I started doing it, to bring a printouted copy of your prescriptions. If you're going somewhere that's really far from home or like far from your doctor's office, bring a printout of your prescription, because if for whatever reason you do need to get a bottle of insulin or get test strips or syringes or whatever, it's easier when you have your prescription handy, ready to go. It's so much easier than having to wait for call your doctor and like get a note into your doctor, which takes God knows how long, and then have your doctor call the pharmacy where you are, and by the time that all happens, you might be long gone, like away. So just bring a prescription. They're not very hard. They're little pieces of paper. I mean, it's pretty easy to pack. But that is the majority of things you should bring on a trip. Obviously, no liquids on a plane, which is hard, but you gotta do it. Just gotta do it. There's other things to treat with. Make sure you bring chargers. Make sure you bring a quarter if you have that mini med pump. I'm not lying. Bring a quarter. Overpack diabetes supplies. It's just overpack. It makes things so much easier. So this is the majority of what I'm bringing. I normally put my stuff that's like loose, like these, or like a glucagon and stuff, in a big Ziploc bag, because then it's all together and it's see-through. And then they're normally like, oh, okay, I get you. I don't need to like look through that. I do have this little pouchy thing that I put stuff in. There's also an app. It's called like My TSA, and it's obviously from the TSA. There's an option that you can search up items, and it tells you all the information about where to pack it, where to put it, where it can and can't go, if it needs to be something like, if your insulin bottle needs to be in your clear liquids bag, which it doesn't, in case you were wondering. I am so sorry. But yeah, so that's about traveling with type 1 diabetes. If you have any extra questions, or if any of you guys have any advice to give other people, please leave it in the comments below. Remember, please subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter. We're all in this together, guys. Together and always. Have a great day. Bye.